Veterans Day is a public holiday held on the anniversary of the end of World War I to honor U.S. veterans and victims of all wars. It replaced Armistice Day in 1954. We come together to honor veterans on Veterans Day because they served and protected our country. We thank you. Today is November 11th, 2015, and we are interviewing Sergeant Carter in the theater of McHenry East campus. Sergeant Carter is 90 years old, having been born on January 1st, 1925. My name is Leah Kirkman, and I'll be interviewing him along with Yaros. And Mrs. Namakudis is recording this interview, and my U.S. history class is in the audience. I am a student at McHenry High School. Sergeant Carter, could you say for the recording what war and branch of service you served in?
I'm sorry,
What war and branch of service you served in?
Okay. Branch of service was the Army. I was in the artillery in World War II.
And what was your rank?
Private when I went in. And then when I come out, I was a sergeant.
All right, and where did you serve?
I served in Europe. When I was, let me tell you how I got in the Army. It wasn't my idea. When I was born in 1925, and when you hit 18 years old, which would be 1943, why the war was going pretty good, and it hadn't got going in Europe yet, but it was going full strength over in the Pacific. And what you had to do the minute you hit 18 years old, you had to go uptown. I was born and raised in a little town in upstate New York, just outside of Rochester, New York, in the Finger Lakes. Nice country. And you had to go up and register for the draft the minute you turned 18. You had just so many days to do it. And if you were ready to go right then and there, no encumbrances, why you went in the Army. When I went up and registered, all the boys that went up and registered at that time was the entire male senior graduating class of my high school. And when I went in, they classified me as 1C. And anybody know what 1C means? I hadn't graduated from high school yet. So they have to give you time to graduate. So if you had already graduated, you 1A. They gave me 1C. This is in January. I graduated from high school on the 6th of June. So I had 6 months to finish high school and then report to camp up in Long Island. I have some pictures at home which are quite striking. You don't see that anymore. But it shows the Erie Railroad Station in Hornell, New York, where I was born and raised. And it's all just a whole bunch of people milling around out there. And all of the boys in the graduating class of my high school all got on the train and went in the Army. There was about 60 of us. Just all got on the train. Now, you could avoid it if you wanted to. In that 6 months period, if you just flat out objected to going in the Army, then you could join the Navy, and or you could join the Marines. You notice I didn't say Air Force.
Right. Why is that?
Because the Air Force was part of the Army
at
that time. The Air Force became a separate entity much later. But if you did, there was a problem there, which my father would not buy into at all. And that is if you quit high school in your senior year to join the Marines or the Navy to get out of going in the Army, then the chances of coming back home and going back and finishing high school got to be
Real slim.
diminished down there a little bit. He said, no, we're not doing that. And I had a real, maybe some of you do today, but back then, I had a real strong father. And if he said you weren't quitting high school to join the Navy or the Marines, why, it wasn't a discussion point. That was it. That's the law. So I finished high school and reported to camp up in Long Island and was sworn into the Army, along with a flock of other guys.
Oh, and how is military life different?
How was it different?
Yeah, than, civilian.
It isn't even similar.
Oh.
Military life is, you got to do it to believe it. It's totally different. It's rather confining. And you have everybody else telling you what you can do and what you can't do. But I went into basic training at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, which was one of the biggest Army bases in the country at that time. And I didn't realize it at the time, maybe about a third or halfway through. Basic training is designed to just exactly what it says. It gives you the basic training. It teaches you how to go from civilian life to military life. Civilian life is when you do whatever you want to, whenever you want to. And military life is when you don't do anything unless they want you to do it. And so the whole crux of basic training in the Army, Navy, Air Force, whatever, Marines, is total obedience. That's what you learn. Total obedience. Yeah, unquestionable obedience. If down the road the lieutenant says, run out there and take this over there and deliver this up here, and you may get killed on the way, you still do it.
Oh.
Because it's blind obedience. That's what basic training is in the military.
Was it harder for you to adapt to it, or was it just kind of easy?
No, I adapted to it because it wasn't optional.
Oh.
You adapt to. There's some guys that fight it all the way, and usually the Army prisons are full of them. But you can't. You got to go along with it because that's the way it is. And if an officer tells you what you're going to do, why, you better start doing it. It's blind obedience.
Do you recall your instructor?
Pardon?
Do you recall your instructor? Do you recall your instructor?
Do I recall him?
Like, what was he like?
We had a second lieutenant when we were in basic training. I can't remember his name, and probably about 24, 25 years old, something like that. And he ran the whole basic training. Was he a nice guy? I don't know. He was a lieutenant. And if he said squat and run, why, that's what you did. And it's just so different. It's I give you, for instance, in the Army that you wouldn't even dream of now. It just seems totally remote, not a place to have to ask somebody if you can go to the bathroom. But in the Army, that's what you have to do.
Oh.
Because you're doing something different than what you're supposed to be doing, so to get permission to do that requires permission. The Army officers are very fair. I can't complain about that. But if you mess up or don't do what you're supposed to do, the fairness kind of fades away quick, and the discipline takes over.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you receive any specialized training?
Any what?
Specialized training?
Yeah, I was in the I was assigned to the artillery, and you're a young kid. I'm 18 years old, and obviously a great big 105 millimeter cannon that fires shells that long, which weigh about 55 pounds each, was not something I was accustomed to. And so we had to learn how to shoot the gun. We had to learn how to aim it, how to set all the directions up and down, east and west, the whole thing. You had to learn how many powder charges to put in the shell. And when you get to the Army camp down at Fort Bragg, or any one of a number of others, why you actually go out on the firing range and you learn to fire, and you do fire. It's very loud, and you're going around like this most of the time trying to hear somebody because it's a loud noise. Yes.
Yeah. And what were some of your duties in the service?
Pardon?
What were some of your duties in the service?
Duties. Well, it was nothing like KP and all that kind of stuff, although you got it every now and then. I had to, on the gun, on the 105 millimeter gun, I had to be able to assume any position on the gun. It takes about 4 guys to fire the gun, to set the powder charges and load it, and set the up and down and the east and west and everything. So you have to know every position is equally as well as the other. So no matter when you're firing it, wherever you end up, you can run it. So you have to do that. It has to become almost automatic. Well, not almost. It becomes automatic. And did I like it? No. It wasn't optional, but it had to be done. And whenever I got a little antsy about being in the artillery, I thought about the infantry guys. They were up there running around on foot with their rifles, and I thought I was in a pretty dang good spot.
How did you stay in contact with your family and friends back home?
Okay, you have email, V-mail, I should call it, V for victory, V-mail, and you can write letters to your mother and dad, your girlfriend, anybody you want to, and they fold all up with the address sticking out of the front, and they collect them practically every day. Somebody comes through and collects the mail, and it's free, and you just send it home to whoever you want to send it to. And then when they collect the mail, they also bring it up. So if you have a letter from your mother or brother, sister's girlfriend, why they deliver it to you at that time, called mail call. And the only thing that is restricted on it, and it's pretty strict, my mother has told me on many occasions that quite a few of my letters came home with holes in them. And when you're in the Army, Navy, Marines, whatever, you're not allowed to discuss numbers, directions, strength. In other words, well, we're in good shape today. We have 5,000 troops on the line here or something like that. You can't say that. And you can't say which direction you're going. You can't give any of those kind of details. You just talk, when you send a letter to your mother, you just send it in generalities. And if you do, the officers, I actually used to feel sorry for the officers that not very often, but They, after everything calmed down at night, they would be holed up someplace in a hole with a flashlight or a lantern or something, and they would be reading all of our mail that we wrote that day. And if it has any troop strength in it, directions, numbers, and a little razor blade, and they just took that number right out of there. And it was not allowed to go home at all. No numbers at all.
Did you ever see combat, and what was that like?
Did I ever see any?
Yeah, and what was it like?
Yeah, it is fun. No. Yes, I saw a lot of combat. 11 months of it. I landed in Invasion, Utah Beach, with the 4th Division, B+2. That is, I landed on 2 days after the initial landing. And you say, well, gee, that must have been pretty quiet then. No, it wasn't. It was probably worse than it was in the beginning. But you got a lot more people. Right. But combat is constant, and it's a contest. If like you were fighting people over there, ISIS now and all that, those things are a contest. And the contest is not only you're fighting each other, but it's who can get up the earliest in the morning to surprise the other guy, who can stay up the latest at night to surprise the other guy, who can get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and give him a surprise attack that we're expecting and all that. So it's pretty grueling. You don't get a lot of sleep. The longest I was up, if any of you have seen the Patton movie, it's depicted right in there. The longest I was ever up was when General Eisenhower asked Patton to move his Third Army up to a different area of the line of Germany. And Patton said he would, we didn't have much choice, he said he would do it. And it would take about 72 hours. So we pulled out of one position down here and moved up about 100 miles. And got into position up at the other place. It took about 72 hours to get all the equipment and everything moved up there. When we got up there, we went immediately into combat. 72 hours, no sleep. You fall down by yourself. We did. We had guys that just fell down, including me. And but that's what you do. It's remember what I told you in the beginning. It's blind obedience. If you're told to do it, you do it. It's not a well, gee, I don't think I want to do that today.
Did you see any concentration camps?
Did I see any? Yes, I did. We liberated one. When the war was just about getting over with, over in Germany, we were going down the road with our tanks, and all of a sudden we came upon this great big fenced-in area. Big. Probably as big as McHenry. And we guesstimated there was probably 20 or 30,000 workers in there. What they did, the Germans went all around Poland, Hungary, Yugoslavia, Romania, and they captured all these people, some women, some men, and mostly men, captured the people and brought them down to these camps. And this particular camp that we liberated was in Neumarkt, Germany, just outside of Nuremberg. And there was big chemical plants down there. And these workers were all down there to operate the chemical plant. And I got time to tell a little story here. I watched a lieutenant. It wasn't a joyful thing, but I watched a lieutenant become a private. I think that's a ballpark. We come upon this camp, and we had this brand new lieutenant. He hadn't been with us through the whole war. He just arrived maybe like 2 months before, 3 months before. we call them 90-day wonders. And he probably graduated from some college and they made him a lieutenant and he sent him over there. And so anyway, he came down and he told us to. Now we were hardened warriors by this time. And we didn't take anything from nobody. So anyway, the lieutenant came down and he says, okay, he says, take one of those tanks and knock it through the front gate. That's what you do. If you come upon a gate or anything like that and you're in the tank, you don't go up there and try to unlatch it and open it up. You just drive the dang tank through it, and that settles the whole problem. So he said, go up there and drive the tank through and let these people out. They've been in there for 5, 6, 7 years, and they're emaciated and they want out. And our first sergeant came over, and the lieutenant, he said, Lieutenant, let's talk this over. And so he told them that was not a good idea. But lieutenant is a lieutenant, and our first sergeant was not, so he said, no, I want the gate knocked down. I'm paraphrasing this a little bit, but that's what happened. I want the gate knocked down and let these people out. So we took one of the tanks, started the motor up, and drove it to the gate, smashed the gate down. All the people came pouring out. And about an hour and a half later, or something like that, this command car pulled up, and it had a colonel in it, big eagle on his shoulder. And he said, what's going on here? And I was right nearby. But the minute you see an eagle, you kind of stay out of the conversation. So I just kind of slithered over there at the side and listened to the whole thing. And he said, well, the lieutenant, he said, we came upon this great big concentration camp. The lieutenant told us to knock the front gate down and let all the people out. And the colonel says, where is this lieutenant? And they said, oh, we don't know. And he says, well, find him. So it took about an hour and a half or so, and then went out and they found the lieutenant and come back up. And he said, explain this to me, what's this all about? I didn't hear the whole thing, but anyway, he explained that we knocked the whole gate down. He says, well, I got a job for you to do, private. And he said, what's that? And he said, get them all rounded up again and back into the camp. This is not what you do. And he said, and the lieutenant was standing there, dumbfounded and everything. I guess he thought he was a hero. But does anybody here know why you don't let everybody out of a camp? Can I tell you in plain English?
Please do.
You don't know what's in the camp. Syphilis, gonorrhea, diseases of any kind in there, and you let all these people out, it gets all over the place. The first thing you do when you liberate a camp like that is you call the medical corps. They come up, they send their doctors and their medical people up, and they go through the 20,000 people. Doesn't matter how long it takes. Who's got this and who's got that? And who's got this disease? Who's got this illness? And everything. Sort them all out, and then the healthy ones can go and the other ones don't. And then you keep the whole thing under control. This lieutenant, private, he didn't do it right. You know what? After that day, it took about 5 days to round them all up. And you know who had to round them up? Us. Yeah. And we never saw them again. Never saw them.
What are some life lessons that you've learned from the military service?
Pardon?
What are some life lessons you've learned from the service?
Life lesson. Good question. Yeah. Discipline. I have good discipline, don't I? Son. you can't have everything you want, usually. And loyalty would be a good word. You really learn that. Because when you're in a unit, they're all depending on you when you're depending on them. Everybody depends intertwined on one another. And if you let your part down, then you've let them all down. So I think that's the main thing. You learn to work together as a unit, as a group. Yeah, definitely.
Have you remained in contact with or reunited with fellow veterans?
Well, the ones, not the ones that I knew then, not too much. Because when the war got over with, everybody went their separate directions. But after that, I belonged to the American Legion and the VFW, both. And I go to the VFW meetings, American Legion meetings. I participate in all the stuff that they do. And I'm very, very, very active with them. And it's led to some other things. I live in Libertyville, and the mayor of Libertyville, Terry Weffler, is a good friend of mine. He's not a veteran. And he asked me 6 or 7 years ago if I would take over Memorial Day, which I do. And that's very interesting, very, very interesting. Particularly getting good speakers. I had a really good speaker. You girls would like to hear this. I had a really good speaker this past Memorial Day. Captain Lady.
Oh.
Yeah. Black Hawk helicopter pilot from Iraq.
Very exciting.
Yeah, she had some interesting stuff to tell.
And how did you readjust to civilian life after your services?
Well, it wasn't that bad. It was. I think the thing that did it the most is what I was talking about before. The minute I got out of the Army, I came home, and my father told me that he was a pretty strong guy. He told me that that I had a GI Bill, and I could go to 4 years of college. I had enough points to go 4 years of college for free on the government, and that I wasn't going to blow it. And he said, we live in upstate New York, and there's the University of Rochester, University of Buffalo, St. Bonnie's, Cornell University, Syracuse University. He said, pick the one you want to go to. You've got 2 weeks. So that was my dad. So I went to University of Buffalo, graduated in, I don't know why I was in a hurry, but I graduated in 3.5 years and got my degree. And then after I got done, I went to work for Bausch & Lomb. You probably all heard of Bausch & Lomb. And I always wanted to get into the selling end of it, so they make a really good line of microscopes, the best there were at that time. So I went to work for them selling microscopes. And I ended up there in a brief tenure of 51 years. Stayed till I was 75. And you never guess what I was doing the last 14 years. The last 14 years, Bausch & Lomb sold their microscope division to Leica out of Germany.
Oh
So I was reporting to Werner Hoyle, and he didn't think it was too funny because I was on the other side in World War II. And I didn't think it was too funny because he was on the other side. But we got along quite well. And I was going to retire at 65. And believe it or not, I say this respectfully, they talked me into staying until I was 75. And you never guess why. I ran the OEM division of Bausch & Lomb. I won't wonder what that means, but they asked me to stay because Werner Hoyle himself asked me to stay. He said, us Germans don't have a clue as to how to do business in the United States, and you guys do, and you got to stay here and teach us. So that's what we did. So I taught my enemy.
How has your military service impacted your feelings about How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
I have great respect for the Army. Navy is okay. No, the Army, Navy, Marines. No, I have great respect for them. I wish we were, can't get political here, so I wish we were keeping them up now like we should be, but we're not. And it's just one of those strong armed forces are something that you just, in this day and age, and the way things are in the world today, you've got to have. If nobody's afraid of you, then they're apt to do something. But if they don't know what they're going to get when they do it, well, then they don't come after you. I'm a strong believer in that. I have great respect for the military.
What was the most amazing thing that you have ever seen in the war?
Just tell them all. Don't even pick one. You said so many amazing things.
No, I told the story a little earlier today. I didn't see it specifically. In other words, I didn't sit right there and there it is. But something happened in World War II that most of you people, you do because you heard it this morning. But most of you people don't even know about it. And it was almost a miracle, marvelous. When we were landing in the invasion in Europe, we landed on Normandy, and the troops were all going ashore, and we were wondering, we were getting plenty of resistance, but it wasn't as bad as we thought it would be. And the rumor had it that the distance across the English Channel where we invaded was 84 miles. Calais to Dover, you've all heard of that, up in that little area where England and France are only 18 miles apart. Calais and Dover, we couldn't figure out why we didn't land up there. And Hitler, who ran Germany, and we were very fortunate because Hitler did not listen to his generals very well. He thought he knew everything. So he ran the show. He sat there in Germany and said that this is a decoy. This invasion across to Normandy is a decoy. They're going to get us all sucked into this whole deal down here, and then the real landing is going to be up here. So he withheld his panzer, he had 2 panzer divisions, held them up in Dover, Calais. A whole bunch of SS troops held them up in Dover, Calais. He could have driven us back into the English Channel down here, but he didn't. He kept them up there. Do you guys ever hear the story of how we did this? If you haven't, to. And if you don't believe it, I could even show you pictures. When the Germans came over from Europe to come over to bomb England, they would come over, and if the British, if they could shoot them down, fine, shoot them down so they couldn't bomb. But once they got over and they bombed, then they turned around and go back. Then you don't shoot them down. Let them get back. Because in order to get back, they fly over Calais, Dover, and they look down at the ground down there, and there's tanks all over the ground. Tanks all over the ground. Fields full of tanks, anti-aircraft guns, everything, all over the ground down there. They get back to their base and they say, man, you want to see all the stuff they've got over in Calais, Dover? I mean, that's the real invasion. This thing is a decoy. Well, anyway, we sucked them in on the whole deal. You know what the tanks were?
No, what were they?
They were made by Goodyear Tire and Rubber Companies. They were inflated. Full size tanks, inflated. With the turret, the gun sticking up in the air, everything. And they were all over the ground down there. and they led them to believe that that's what was going to happen. And then the other thing they did, and you wouldn't know anything about this if you had to be there. We didn't know any of this because we're up there landing in the other place. We get up there and we said, well, if they're going to have a general in command of the invasion, who would it be? Patton, General Patton. He'd be the one to command the invasion. He's over in England and London going around giving talks at ladies' clubs. And to all the more to make them think that that's not the real invasion. He's going to be in charge of it. So anyway, after they finally got all done with that, and they realized that this was not, this was the real thing, but then everybody massed down at St. Lo, and then we busted through the German lines at St. Lo, went across France, and General Patton took command. Our unit, 4th Division, was the first troops into Paris. Our tank was sitting in front of Notre Dame Cathedral when this command car came up with a colonel in it and said, we got to get out of here. And we said, why do we have to get out of here? And they said, well, General Eisenhower told General de Gaulle of France that he could take Paris. And he says, we already did, so we got to get out of here so he could do it. So we all got out of Paris, and de Gaulle took Paris and marched down the Champs-Élysées with all the picture you've seen of all the guys there. And that's how it happened. We went out on a sugar beet field in Bondy on the Seine River and sat out there for 4 days while General de Gaulle took it.
Do you have any other stories that you'd like to share with us?
Yes. Just happened. When we got in on the beach at Normandy, our main objective that General Eisenhower gave our division, the 4th Division, was we'd get on the beach, secure the beach, make a right turn, and go up and take the port of Cherbourg. Port of Cherbourg was about 80 miles up there, and if you got 200,000 guys coming ashore on the beaches, and then it's going to be up to a couple million coming ashore, I mean, you're very limited in what you can do with landing in a bunch of sand. I mean, it's hard to get the supplies in. There's 3 things you have to get in. You have to get in the food, you have to get in the ammunition, and the gasoline. And it's very difficult landing those things on sandy beaches, so you need a port. So we went up to take the port of Cherbourg, and our tank was the first tank in the town. We get down the main square, and there's other tanks coming right along. We're down the main square, and I looked over at the building over there, and here's the Nazi flag hanging. 3 minutes? I've got to hurry. Nazi flag is hanging down this building. And I thought, wow, what a souvenir. So is. That's the flag that was hanging down the building. I grabbed it off the building and rolled it all up and put it in the tank. And a few days later, when I got some time, I decided to put it in a wooden box, a shell box, and send it home to my mother. I got it all wrapped up in the box and took it back down to the lieutenant and give it to him. He says, "What are you going to do with that?" And I said, "Well, send it home to my mother." He said, "You're dreaming." He said, "That thing's going to go to the rear. All boxes have to be open. And some colonel back there in the rear is going to say, 'Ooh, what a nice souvenir.' And his name is going on it, and your mother's name is going off." And I thought, what choice have I got? So I did it. And about 2 months later, I got a note from my mother, and she said, "Your flag arrived. It's up in Tuttle and Rockwell's window with a little placard on there telling where it came from."
Well, that's amazing.
Can I tell you one more? You got time? We were moving into a town called Prum, Germany. This is my pride and joy here. Moving into this little town in Prum, Germany, and we came down in the main square town again, and down there, and the infantry guys were going through the buildings. They got into this one building, and it was the Nazi headquarters for that whole region. And they captured the commanding general. And they're marching him out. He's like this, marching out of the building. And they're trying to get his Luger off of him, because they want his Luger. And I didn't want any Luger, but he had this iron cross hanging around his neck. So I relieved him of it. It says on it 1936, which means that he got it when the Nazis had just started the war and they were blitzkrieging across Poland. That's where he got his. I did, just to take 1 minute and let you know I don't do everything correct. I made a mistake on this. I found out many years later that these come in 5 different degrees. 5 different degrees. And the thing that differentiates them is the ribbon around the neck that holds the cross. How do you get that? So I don't know what this is. I tell everybody it was the top one. Can I tell you just another quick thing? You gotta go?
But thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Huh? Yeah, we gotta have 2 periods.
You have all this.